One.
Hey everybody, welcome to Be a Better Human. My name is Ryan Schreins. I'm your host here with Luke Westlake. We're very excited for episode 4. Today we have Lisa Lopes from London, Canada. Her company is 9 of Water. Very excited to have you on. Thank you so much,
thank
Lisa.
you.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm honored. I'm honored to join you guys today.
For sure. This podcast is sponsored by Rode Microphones. And as we do in each and every episode, we just want to give you a disclaimer that the information you hear in this is not medical advice. These are things that worked for me and Luke. These are things that work for Lisa. These are things that Lisa practices in her own business and things that she does with other people. Please take from it what you will. And hopefully some of these things will not only help you, make you a better human and more positive, but it will heal you. And some of the things that you're going to hear in throughout the episode are, of course, real and raw. We like to keep it real and raw here at Be a Better Human, right, Luke? And we like to get rolling. Let's get right into it. Sorry for the delay getting going here, folks. We just had a little technical difficulty, but we got that all sorted out. So, Lisa, why don't we get this going? Why don't you tell everybody, how would you describe what you do?
So I am a Reiki master. I work with astrology, a few different healing tools in my toolbox, my spiritual toolbox. If I was to niche it down, it's literally, I help individuals bring soul into their lives, making it sacred, whether or not that's their life, whether or not that's their relationship, whether or not that's their businesses. So leading people to grander truth of who they are and inner peace. Literally. I can't hear
Ryan, you're muted, sir.
Well, I was doing that to be nice. I didn't want to bump her off. What inspired you to get into what you're doing?
So I've always led people to love. Always been the advocate. Always, helping people if they were being bullied, that sort of idea. But in 2005, I had one of my first awakenings where my anxiety was ridiculously high. So just really deep anxiety attacks, panic attacks, that sort of idea. And Reiki and breath work and yoga is essentially what got me through and running. So I literally just put an oxygen mask on myself, took care of myself versus extending help to others in a capacity that I wasn't drained. And that's what led me to where I am today, was essentially just saying yes to myself. And I was able to conquer quite a few fears and my own anxiety. And so here we are.
Wow, amazing.
That's kind of, yeah.
And here we are.
And here we are.
Yeah, and so now that you've sort of gone through that journey and you've become enlightened to all of these things, you're now practicing these things as a business, right? 9 of Water, and you're based in London, Canada. Where do you provide these services?
So I provide them now. I've been providing them the last couple of years online and downtown London. I have my little center, my little office space at Central and Richmond. So either you can see me in person for the time being when we get back up and running, or online.
Of course. So yeah, people can reach out to you online right now, of course, with everything that's going on. Now, so why don't we get into that? So there's lots to talk about, of course, right now with everything that's going on and all the different things that of course, that you're involved in helping people with. So where to start? Why don't we start with talking about one of the things that I know there's going to be a lot of parents on here. And you mentioned something to me earlier when we were chatting, and I know I spoke to another friend of mine last night, and he was talking to me about how difficult it is with kids right now at home and homeschooling. And I mean, the parents are also working from home, trying to figure out how to work from home, which is a huge challenge as well, just on its own. And I think this is relevant for people who don't have children as well to listen to this, because I have a young daughter. She's one, of course, but that doesn't compare to someone who has, kids that are in elementary school or high school or whatever. It's a whole other animal, I'm sure, and I will get to know one day. But I think it's, what I'd like you to touch on is, with all of the challenges going on right now with homeschooling and with, both spouses working from home, what are some of the things that you recommend people can do, or some of the things they can talk about, or what kind of things can positively influence the situation that we're all in right now?
So, from my experience and what I've seen, um, we really have to drop our ego as to what's happening, right? We're all doing the best that we can collectively. And I think that once we can give ourselves permission to breathe and just kind of map out how we are going to navigate our day, for essentially our children that are at home, because, depending on how deep we want to get, first and foremost, right? Like, our subconscious mind is developed from the ages of 0 to 8 years of age. So for children that are under the age of 8, just really giving children some extra time and explanations and just awareness. And, just giving, this is all new. There's no handbook, there's no guide, there's no rules. All of that, those paradigms are being thrown out the window regardless. So it really is what works best for each individual person, and with the little loves essentially at the forefront, right? Because there's no hierarchy, right? Parents, I think, for the longest time was like, I'm the boss, I rule the ship. And that doesn't work. And I think that just giving children permission to have a voice, and what do they need? I think our generation, Ryan, like, we didn't have a lot of those explanations. It was just like guns a-blazing or balls to the wall, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Kind of, we can't deny that. People were doing the best they could, again, with what they had. But, we're just up in the game as far as like, what is, what's my husband's needs? What are my needs? What are my children's needs? And just placing everything else kind of off to the side a little bit until everything kind of balances in the household.
Now, do you find in your household that there's more time or less time being of what's going on? Because, people are home, but it's like, I could talk to some people that say, I'm bored, but those are people who are literally at home alone with nothing to do. I find that I talk to parents who have kids and they're like, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's a gong, like, it is a gong show. I think that what I've seen from clients, and personally speaking, I've literally had to, time block, whether or not I'm getting up a little bit earlier, or whether or not I'm like, screw it, we're not home, like, this is being thrown out the window. I spent, an hour this week, 2 hours actually, just trying to figure out how to log into the VLE with the Catholic board here. And that shouldn't have taken me that long. So it was just super convoluted for me. And I thought, no, we're just going to spend an hour, max 2 hours a day on schooling. My kids are little for, I guess if people have got like different ages that they're working with, it's all going to be a little bit different. But really just reminding themselves that we are all doing the best that we can. And the extra pressure that we put on ourselves to succeed, what does that even mean, right? So it's, where can you allocate that time to breathe and to enjoy the fact that we are home? This is the universe has given us, or whomever, whatever dating you want to use, but the universe has given us a gigantic time out, to really enjoy, and have a reset. So how can we bring in, or how can you bring in an element of that, into your day to kind of just sit and reflect on that? We're making massive history right now.
Yeah, we're going to be part of the history books for sure.
Totally, right? So, like, time capsule this stuff, time capsule this stuff for Sophie, because, you are going to be saying, when I was, like, we weren't trucking through feet of snow, right? Like, we're driving downtown and seeing the boards up on the windows. So
no, I drove by Prince Al's today on Richmond Street, and I actually took out my phone and took a photo of the boards on the windows. Like, it's, you're totally right. You know, whatever town you're tuning in from, I know there's people tuning in right now from Canada and the United States and around the world. You know, Lisa's totally right. You know, document all this stuff because it's literally going to be, you know, I, I, I wasn't old enough when my grandfather, who was in the World War II, passed away. And me and my first cousin were like brothers. We talk about it all the time. We're like, you know, we weren't men, like we weren't grown up enough to know to ask him to have a real conversation about what he went through. And what we're all living right now is not that much different from, you know, I mean, obviously there are some major differences,
Yeah.
but this is dramatically affecting the whole world just like that did. And you know, we should all not forget what's going on here and document it and teach, you know, our kids and our grandkids and so on. Because you know, we can't continue to let this happen again and again and again. We have to wake up. And I think the fact that we're in 2020, we need to have that 2020 vision and know that, you know what, it's happened in the past, but now we're starting to wake up. And with that being said, I
You
would
know,
like
one thing I just want to
yeah, go
touch
ahead.
on a little bit is that, you know, people just want things to go back to normal, right? People just keep saying, I just want things to go back to normal. But do you actually want things to go back to normal? Right? Like you have to ask yourselves that.
Well, to an extent. I mean, normal is a relative term, right?
Right? Yeah. So I think that we're not going back to normal in any, you know, in any case. So again, you know, let's make the heart love the currency as we navigate over the next few days and over the next few weeks and over the next few months or however the case may be. The Buddhists say that the heart is the middle ground. So, you know, when we can make decisions from that space of the heart center, that's when we're in truth and that's when we're in peace. If we're making them from, you know, logically, we're not honoring what we need as human beings. And if we're making them out of survival, then that's just a whole other, you know, we're making them out of fear. We're either in fear and in anger, or we're in love, or we're in growth. That's kind of where we are in there, right? And how you want to feel, or what you want to, you know, what you want to manifest from there is right in the center. So if you're in fear, you know, what's the why? What's the intention? How do you want to feel? And that's ultimately what gets you right back over to growth.
Yeah, I've said that in a few episodes that you know, the currency of this whole thing isn't even necessarily the virus. It's fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I've watched several people online, you know, that I know really well comment about, you know, people should stay home because, you know, this and that and go on and on and on and say things, you know, that I just sit back and I go, wow, they are really in fear. They're not saying they're in fear, but they are. Like, you know, I think in some small way, I think everybody is, and even the people who don't want to admit it. The currency of this thing, you know, globally, in every single human being on the planet right now is fear, and you know, fear of dying, fear of the unknown, fear of all kinds of things, right? And whether people are willing to admit it or not, it's unprecedented. Like that's the unprecedented part for me is the amount of fear going on in the world because of the lack of information and the lack of knowing. You know, I mean, at least with World War II, you know, you could see the planes, you could hear the bombs. I mean, this is something that people don't understand. They can't see
Yeah.
it. They don't, like, even the nurses and the doctors I've talked to don't know what's going on. The numbers don't make sense. There's all kinds of weird stuff going on that, you know, people in power can't explain or explain, but then have to retract. And there's just so much fiction and lack of reality right now that everybody's just in fear of not knowing what reality is. And so we're just kind of forming a new reality, I think, right
Yeah.
now.
And I
Which
think, and
kind
I
of goes
think
to
that
what you were saying.
I think that there, you know, there is like, it's okay to be in fear. Like it's okay to feel that and to not have the answers, right? Like that's okay. So in order to be present with that, it literally is, how are we grounding ourselves? What makes us feel good? Is it a walk outside? If you feel like having a bath in the middle of the afternoon, have a bath. You know, is it going for a walk or, you know, into nature? Then go into nature where you can hear different sounds and see different things, where we can kind of clear some of that up, right? It's not, you know, the worrying is essentially what's killing people, right? It's the fear that's killing people. So how can we receive the grace that's around us?
So that being said, how what you work with a lot of different types of symptoms and stuff. Um, how do you see this whole thing affecting people in their lungs and their body and their mind? Like, how do you see this whole thing affecting people in all of the different ways?
So what's really interesting is that I our anything that happens to our physical sense has already happened within our mind, emotionally, or mentally. It's already there. So if someone's, you know, there's an element of a migraine that tends to be blocked energy throughout their body somewhere, right? They're not connecting to spirit, so their energy gets hit at the top of their head, like within their crown, and they can't escape. So that's kind of like the pounding headaches. That's where that sort of comes from. So with COVID, it's interesting because it's really affecting the lungs. And the lungs represent suffocation. And literally, how and where are we suffocated within our own lives? Are we suffocated in our marriages where we don't know our partners? Are we suffocated, again, in our families where we don't even know our families because we're so enthralled into our businesses that we forget that what we've got outside of ourselves? Where can't people take a deep breath within their own life? And there's no irony that's affecting the lungs because people aren't breathing.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's and that's why I think this is a big wake up call for a lot of people, and
Mhm.
for sure. And even myself, I use the same example in a couple of episodes now, but my neighbor didn't even know what I did for a living. And I've lived here for 2 years. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty bad. He cut my lawn a couple of days ago. He cuts my lawn, every once in a while when I'm busy at work or something. But, I mean, he's a nice young guy and I talk to him quite often. And the fact that he didn't know what I do is like, oh, wow, I guess I really don't take the
Well,
time.
I think that that's part of it too, because we are missing that human connection, right? So I
Absolutely.
think that, you know, it's affecting us because literally where do we need to have that heart connection again? And literally this whole area is essentially affected. It's the heart center, it's the rib cage, all of it. We're safe to evolve, right? Boundaries have a bad rap because boundaries aren't celebrated. Evolution isn't really celebrated. It's like, let's just stay the course and not evolve. That there's some mentalities like that. And I think that this is part of COVID is part of that. Let's look at where do we need to essentially breathe and where can we bring in the sacred breath? Where can we bring in spirit? Spiritless breath in Latin is actually spiritus, which is basically spirit connection to spirit, right?
Right.
And
So,
again, people forget to breathe.
um,
I'm
talk
not breathing
about
right now. I'm a little bit nervous.
talk about conscious relationships.
um, you're just gonna like get right in there.
Yeah, of course. Why not?
We're like leading ourselves in.
It's real and raw. Don't forget. This is.
So conscious relationships. So I'm in one, and we've been
Amazing.
we've been parenting Lydia and Simon in with consciousness, like basically awareness at the core. So it's almost like you take care of you for me, and I'll take care of me for you, right? And that's kind of where the consciousness stems from, right? We are not victims in our situation. So consciousness relationships is literally asking the other person, what do you need and how can I help you? And I think that's that's missing. There's a lot of blame, projection, your fault. I did a live actually yesterday on Instagram, and I had said it was actually quite comical, but basically, it was a little bit about awareness and how people get pissed at each other because their husband doesn't take out the garbage. You didn't take out the fucking garbage. Well, what's happening is there's an emotional need that's not met. So instead of being like, you didn't do that, let's look at what the emotion is. What's the adjective essentially that is missing, and reframe it so that it's a compliment versus a trigger or a belittling sort of criticism where, I appreciate when you support me. by taking out the garbage.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and just shifting that and being aware of each other, it's not just me in this relationship, it's Marco, right? So I think that's part of conscious relationships. We cannot forget each other, and we're playing on the same team. A lot of people forget that they're playing on two separate teams, but guess what? It's the same team. It's the Lopes team.
Yeah.
And you know, I think that's where we have to drop the egos. We have to drop the swords. And when we're in denial, when we don't want to see our truth, when you know, I do a soul shaker mentorship program, and I've been doing it, I want to say for the past 3 years as a beta, the last year as an actual mentorship program. And there's 3 phases to it. The first is self-awareness. The second is boundary setting. And the third portion of it is receiving, like unearthing, I receive. Because people aren't self-aware. You know, it's like, well, my partner did this, or they made me feel this way. Well, do you feel that way? Well, actually, I do feel that way about myself. Well,
Right.
shift that, you know? So where we, you know, looking at our own selves. And I think that the consciousness, it starts with me, you know? So if I'm projecting something, where am I in fear? Where am I in insecurity? Where am I in judgment of my partner? So if I'm in judgment of them, I'm in judgment of myself. And that's where the consciousness comes into play, because it's like, what's the awareness on here? What am I seeing? How am I feeling? They don't exist. They're just a reflection of me.
Do you think that, like, because there's a lot of people, you know, I grew up with a, you know, a major caregiver type in my life. Do you think that people give too much away and don't focus enough attention and energy on themselves? Like, that's
One,
part of all of that?
100%. And, you know, we overextend. You know, if I'm giving you something and I'm getting pissed because you're not appreciating it, well, where am I overextending some of those gifts? You know, and I think that people need to, you know, we're not giving to receiving, right? We're giving wholeheartedly, unconditionally. But if that's not what's taking place, it starts with me. If my cup, if my cup's, like, I got this much water left, I'm not giving you my water from this cup. I'm giving you the water from the overfloweth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it just kind of depends on the scenario. Again, I would probably give you some of my water out of my cup. But if I'm, where I can't give from an empty cup, right? So we want to ensure that our cup is full by self-care, self-love. And that's not like a day at the spa. That literally is like, wait a second, let's look at, why am I doubting myself?
So, so that being said, part of that is because, lots of people self-love, like there's a lot of insecure people out there, and there's a lot of people that struggle with mental health. And I know that for years, I mean, I'm not afraid to admit this, for years, I struggled with different things. I wanted to make music, but I had no time. I wanted to be a big famous DJ, but I just didn't put in the time, didn't put in the effort. Too busy working, too busy doing other things. And in the meantime, I honed these skills of being, a good lighting person. My dad did the Blues Fest here in London, and, put it out there to the newspaper that he had the 2 best lighting guys out, in Canada on the show, me and Andy Renson. And that was humbling for me. Like, I realized, that was a moment in time where I realized, wow, I do have a value. Like, I am someone. I'm, I've learned all this. I've put in time for a reason. And it helped me create a connection with myself that I didn't even know I had. I didn't have a sense of purpose. And, so I'd be curious to know your thoughts on, how do you find, your soul purpose in life? Like, what are things that people, especially right now, because everybody's kind of they're at home, they're with their spouses, their kids, or whatever. And, they're all staring at each other in the face, and half the time losing their minds. So
Yeah.
how do people take the time, even if it's, for that half an hour or hour before they close their eyes at night? How do they find their soul's purpose in this time? Because I uniquely think that this time is key. Again, 2020, right? We're in 2020, seeing 2020 back. So how do people moving forward, how do they find their soul's purpose?
So I don't know that there's one, like, I think everybody will have a specific journey, right?
For sure.
But it literally is asking. I do a module with my soul shakers about who are we becoming. Choose who you are becoming. And in this sort of time frame, it literally is asking yourself, what is it that you need, and ensuring that you have the basics. Like a child, what Sophie needs to an extent, right? A clean bum, good food, rest, structure. Where can we bring that in? Literally those basics. It's not anything grandiose. It's the basics. It's, we got a new puppy. And I said to the lady, like, what do I need with this puppy? And she's like, food and fresh water and lots of love. And I thought, oh yeah, you're right. So it literally is that. Like, people just need to ask themselves, what is it that I need? And that's a really tough question to answer, because majority of the time we don't ask ourselves that. Right? So it literally is like, oh wait, does this feel good? Yes, let's stick to that. So anything that's like self-sabotaging or anything that's noisy, turning off the news or the media, or if Aunt Judy is negative Nelly and she's messaging all the stats constantly, Aunt Judy doesn't get to send any more messages. That sort of idea. Anything that's loud and obnoxious needs to be brought just to a place of peace, because that's where we're going to start hearing what we essentially need and what feels good, because we don't have all those extra distractions. So really just, in a time of now is simple, like really mastering the mindset on what somebody needs right now as the basics.
Yeah, you are what you believe, right? For sure. And I've heard I've been doing a lot of research, obviously, in the last 4 to 5 weeks around this thing. And I've noticed that a lot of people talk about that the best ideas and the best things get downloaded to you in silence. Like when you're calm, when it's quiet, only then can you really mentally, manifest and hear what's going on around you. Until then, it's just noise, right? And I think that's what you're trying to say, is get rid of the noise, get rid of the loudness.
Yeah, anything that causes fear, anything that causes a state of worry. Again, we are in, it's unprecedented times, but we don't need to add all the extra stuff on top of ourselves, extra expectations, that sort of idea. Yeah, really limit that sort of thing now.
Like, Luke, you made a big pivot, right? Like, I mean, I don't know how many people, I don't know how much we've talked about it in previous episodes, but like Luke, for every bit of I don't know if you've watched the previous episodes or not, Luke worked with me at a business here in London, Canada called PA Shop. It's my family's business. And Luke was a front of house technician and did all kinds of logistics and operations and did some supervisory type stuff. And then I'll never forget it. It was we were at a show and here in town, and Luke's like, "Hey man, just so you know, my last day's Monday." I'm like, "What?" Like, are you kidding me?
Surprise.
And and Luke saw something in a friend of ours, Chris Wiley. He saw something in Chris, and he felt, what, Chris can help change the world. He can help make the world a better place. And Luke, convinced his wife Anna to let him go off on this journey. Speaking of journeys, and help Chris. And Chris did what he could to pay Luke and to support him and help Luke help him. And it's been an incredible journey for both of you guys. And I know you both pretty well now, and I know you obviously very much much better because we know each other a long time. But I see the passion and the happiness and everything you're doing for Chris and everything we're doing here at Be a Better Human. And neither of them are incredibly paying right now. Of course, there's not a lot of revenue streams for Chris because of events being down and all kinds of things. But, at the end of the day, and of course he just came off Big Brother, but it's all good because at the end of the day, there's a vision, there's a plan, and you've been really passionate. So Luke, can you speak to sort of, how you found your sort of purpose through all of that, and you know, how you were able to take that gigantic leap and make the pivot.
Well, it started with me because Chris was able to help me out a lot personally. And just in the music industry, I know a lot of people who are dealing with mental health issues and physical health issues. Um, and I don't know, I kind of saw the writing on the wall in terms of what was happening with the live production industry, and it didn't seem like it was all that safe anymore. It didn't seem very secure anymore. And like the bottom line is that I just wanted to help other people. And then by, like kind of sitting and meditating and thinking about what that would actually look like, to me, the number one answer kept coming up as okay, it's going to be Chris. Like, Chris has helped me. I've seen him help so many other people. Like from autistic children to people with anxiety to people with PTSD, people with schizophrenia, like pretty intense stuff. He helped me figure out an old head injury from when I was a kid playing hockey. So in terms of who I've personally seen help more people than anyone else, it was Chris. And for me, just helping him with social media, with editing videos, with all this kind of stuff, getting the promotion out there was the only sort of path that I could see. And unfortunately, we built everything centered around traveling and live events. But again, it's one of those things where if you're aware and you have the freedom and the ability, you can actually pivot. So we've pivoted in real time, and now we're offering everything online. Like, we're actually getting a whole membership set up on his website so that you can just go there and it's all in one place. But in terms of, like, that's just having the ability to like really focus on that kind of thing. And it's helped be a better human. It's helped all of us, in terms of like all this technology that I've got around us right now. That's kind of what I've been doing in the background for the last 25 minutes, is just getting the YouTube stream up and getting the Instagram stream up. Just, little technical difficulties here and there as we go forward. But that's the ability to pivot in real time. And, that's kind of where we're at.
I think to touch on that, Luke, for you, I think that with the work that, when someone's going through an awakening or looking at it from a mental health or an anxiety standpoint, it's just reminding yourself that you're safe. And for anybody now, it's what are two things that you can do to feed your mind, and feed, like, as far as like positive nutrition, nourishment. And I think that's part of, shifting through any sort of mental anxieties or any sort of anxieties, knowing that you're safe, but shifting that to how can I nourish my mind, as far as like, what are the voices that I'm hearing and what can we do in that case right now? So you went to meditation, you went to silence, you got out in nature, that sort of idea. And that's where I think there's the key in that now, is what people need to be doing, versus like, we're still on that rat race of like, oh, I got to do this and I got to do that and I got to do this. And it's like, actually, let's slow it back down a little bit, so you can hear. Right?
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest things for me was, letting go. Like, letting go of where's money going to come from? Where's like, how are we going to pull this off? How am I going to make sure that my family is fed and we have a roof over our heads?
Mm-hmm.
But it was like literally the moment. And, shout out to our good friend, Brendan. He kind of, saw, it was like the height of the thing with Chris and Big Brother. And it was just a lot going on. And he said, hey man, like, just stop and breathe, like stop and breathe, like create a bit of space, like take a day off. And, the answer is going to come.
Yeah.
And that's been like a big thing for me, is just being able to stand back and be okay with not knowing where stuff is going or what's happening, and just focusing on that space.
And I think, surrendering is key to that. That's where part of the I receive. I give myself permission to receive, and I think that's where we surrender. And the universe does. Once you're aligned with love, or you're in alignment, that's when it's delivered. And literally, I don't want to use the word magic, but literally it's like magic. It's like, wow, I was saved off. I was almost falling off that ledge, and I was saved. And when you're in purpose, when you're authentic, when you're in integrity, that's essentially it. Once the ego's involved, that's what's stopping us. Fish, it's like flowing with the water. They don't swim upstream.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right.
Well, and surrendering and just sort of having that faith. Like a lot of people reached out to me as things got kind of weird, because a lot of people know that I generally have my finger on the pulse of these kind of things well ahead of time. I called a lot of people ahead of time, just told them, like, hey, like, you don't have to worry about it, but just get prepared, just enough that you could basically stay inside for a month or two and not really have to leave, because it might get weird. So I had a lot of people kind of reaching out to me when it did get weird, and everyone's like, how come you're so calm and you have such conviction that everything's going to be fine? And it's because I have faith.
Yeah. And you've been living it. Yeah. And
and I'm living it. Yeah.
Yeah.
We have this podcast. The thing with Chris is exploding. Like, that's absolutely exploding. And there's some other stuff going on in the background that we're going to be releasing here real soon. Like, there's like, it's so funny. I'm working harder and longer hours, as Anna can attest to, than I've ever done it before. And it's just, like I couldn't imagine being bored right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to take a second. I want to take a second to thank Anna and Lena, our wives, for allowing us to stay up every night. And I'm not afraid to say, like, I literally haven't gone to bed before 5 a.m. in like 2 weeks. And it's just exciting. I mean, I get like this with a lot of things. I did a music conference for 8 years called the CDJ Show in Toronto for DJs and dance music producers. And it was the same thing. I'd stay up all night, every night, working on it, and I feel the exact same way right now. I feel very passionate about the fact that this is an awakening, and this is an opportunity, a huge one in a lot of ways, for a lot of people, if they're up for it. And if they're not, then take, like we were saying, Lisa, take the time to look inside and fill your cup up, right? Like, that's now's the time to do that, so that when we emerge from our cocoon, so to speak, we're ready, to give. Just like you are right now, Luke. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
I think that, talking about that cocoon, that butterfly analogy is used quite a bit in the metaphysical world, because right now we're in that chrysalis, we're in the goo, we're in the ugly darkness. We're not even sure what's happening. Right. So that's going to take a little while to essentially have light, or have that sort of, coming out of that. So working on like shadow work, working on the fear. So if there's anybody with mental health or that's struggling again with the anxiety, the key is breathing, and the key is, looking at yourself, saying, how can I bring in some solitude?
Yeah, absolutely. And Lisa, I just want to mention, because I know at some point here we're going to jump into some questions. If anybody has any questions for Lisa or Luke or myself, please start populating them down in the comments area. And if it's something you don't want to post publicly, feel free to message the page through Messenger. Luke will be monitoring that, and we'll make sure to get to your questions as we go. Luke, if any particular questions come up that you want to fire through, feel free to cut me off. It's all good. I do a lot of rambling. Lisa, so let's get into talking about frequencies. So there's lots of talk about, frequencies in terms of bad things out there. But let's talk about, for a second, healing using frequency.
Okay.
Because I think there's a lot of people that, for lack of better terms, I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on right now. And, because there's people out there that don't understand this stuff. And I didn't understand it either when I first started my journey a couple years ago of figuring out the world and health and food and all kinds of really cool things I've now learned and become a better human for. So let's talk about, and Luke, I want you in on this too, because for those of you that don't know, Luke has actually studied frequency quite heavily. And so I'd love for the two of you to kind of enlighten all of us, because I'm even new to a lot of this still, you guys, with regards to frequency. But let's talk about how frequencies can help you. What kind of frequencies can help heal you? And let's talk about it in a sense of frequency, vibration, and light, in that order.
Frequency, light, in that order. Okay, Luke, do you want to go first?
Well, I'm really good with how to deal with frequencies you don't want. So if we want to start with frequencies, I can help.
Yeah, why don't you? Because Lisa, you do sound bowl therapy too,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
So why don't you start with this?
So there's lots of different ways that you can use. We are frequency, we are vibration, right? If you increase the frequency of anything, there's again good or bad to that. So if we look at it from like a sound healing standpoint, there's different tools that you can use. Music, obviously, like drums and whatnot, but there's sound as far as crystal bowls and Tibetan bowls. So I use crystal tone alchemy bowls, where they are used, I don't want to get too deep into it, but basically it's just aligning.
Yeah, we can come back and do another episode where we get like deeper, but deep. But get deep enough to explain it. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're just kind of like tapping into like our theta waves and just connecting our own self with our own breath and the sounds to kind of soften all of the frequencies that are out of whack. So if you think of a soprano singer, the highest pitch is C, right? So that's what's going to shatter some of those some of the crystal vases or the windows or any sort of modality or any sort of like element or dis-ease within our body holds that certain frequency. And sound can essentially be, or sound through frequency is essentially going to shatter that. So some of the better frequencies, when you were asking me that earlier, I thought, which one would I touch on? Is I would have, especially now, is touch on two basic ones. Is 432 and 528.
Amazing.
And 432 is, if I were to put it as a little niche, it's the heartbeat of the earth.
Well, the 432 is it's the natural resonant frequency of the universe, which is also the natural resonant frequency of Earth and human beings and sort of all living things. Just to expand on what you were saying.
Yeah. So that's one of the better frequencies that I've seen and that I was taught for anxiety, any heart diseases, blood pressure. It's super soothing. If there's any sort of like emotional blockages, it brings those emotional blockages into a state of balance. So it helps with like unblocking your intuition. So, your third eye, your truth. And it's great for mental clarity. So if someone's, struggling with mental fog or confusion, 432 is great for that. So you can actually go into Spotify and say you want to hear Queen. You can put Queen 432 hertz and it'll have listed all this. And again, I'm going to butcher how to explain that. You guys can do this, but basically how it's the frequency of that song. Am I killing it? No.
No, we're good. We're
right.
Good.
But yeah, so it was recorded at 432 hertz. So you can have that extra healing through that song.
Well, just to expand a little bit more on the 432 thing. So 432 is the tuning of the note A. And then everything is tuned and tempered off of that. So in general, for the last, Ryan, 80 years or so, we've been using 440 hertz for A tuning. And then there's Robert Edward Grant. Am I butchering his name? Yeah.
No, you're good. Yeah.
Robert Edward Grant. So he goes into extreme detail about this, and we're going to have him on at some point. I know it.
Yeah.
He goes into extreme detail. And basically 432, when you look at it, all of those frequencies, actually, when you look at it on an oscilloscope, you actually create patterns out of it. So all of the notes,
pretty cool.
You're creating patterns, where 440 tuning is chaotic looking. Like there's no like images that you can create. There's like the flower of life.
It looks like a pile of sand. That's all it looks like a little blob.
Yeah, it looks chaotic. So you're basically looking at order in the 432 hertz tuning, and chaos in 440. And there's actually like quite a few different conspiracies regarding why and when and who changed it from 432 to 440, because historically it was actually 432. There was a big chunk of time where 432 was the tuning.
Wasn't it Hitler? Was it Hitler that changed it to like 441 or something? Are we allowed to say that?
440.
Are we not allowed to say that?
That's yeah, of course. That's one of the theories for sure.
Yeah, there's a bunch of
just to make people a little bit crazier.
Well, just yeah, like you're basically creating chaos in terms of like you're not accessing the resonant frequency of the universe, and it's a really hard thing for people to kind of understand. But the universe actually does, like, that's why we have constants in math. That's why we have all these things that we can measure that are constant. We can use in our equations and come up with the right answer in terms of like how the universe works compared to our math. Like there's a reason that all kind of works out.
I have a really bad analogy for you, but it totally fits, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's like you have an imperial measuring tape, right? And you measure a 2x4 and you cut it, but instead of cutting it to 24 inches, you cut it to 24 and an eighth or 24, and a quarter.
Right.
And it doesn't fit. So you take a hammer and you smash it into place, right? Everybody's done that. You grab the hammer and you tap it in, right? But it doesn't fit, right? It's jammed in there and it's creating pressure, right?
Yeah. And if you're doing that with all of the notes, then you're basically like, you can imagine, even if you try and jam the piece of wood with the hammer, at some point you're going to be way out. By the time I'm not in construction, so I'm terrible at this analogy. but by the time you've framed the entire house, you're 3 feet off at the end of it, because an eighth of an inch and an eighth of an inch and an eighth of an inch, like all of a sudden it becomes very difficult to build the house that somebody's going to want to live in and accomplish the goal. So there's a lot, and it's not just a frequency, a single frequency. Like 432 hertz itself is just the A note. Everything is based off of that. So it's actually kind of difficult unless you're really listening, and it's more of a feeling thing. It's difficult to tell if music was recorded and in 432 versus 440, just because it doesn't sound odd. It doesn't change it's not like when you listen to certain Eastern music where they have completely different scales.
Yeah.
It's a very different sounding thing. But this 432 versus 440 is very similar in how everything goes together, but it's the overall feeling that you get from it.
Yeah. Lisa, what's 428? Or
528. 528 would be
I just want to go back.
I think the next one, it's the next note up, 528.
Yeah. So it's a C.
Yes.
So I just want to go back to Luke about there's actually a study in, I think it was like 2015, 2016, about dentists and root canals. And they actually took a bunch of cases and they played 432 during the root canals. And they had substantial decrease in anxiety and in fear and in pain when they played that sort of frequency through their root canals. Mm-hmm. I know that because I have a fear of dentistry stuff.
I've had a couple root canals. That's really wild. That's actually pretty cool.
So
I'm pretty sure like Dr. Phil was playing during mine or something. It was definitely not music at 432. Mm-hmm. It should have been, though. You're right. That would have been interesting.
So, 5 from my practice for C, like I would play 5. Like if somebody wanted to heal, go into a really deeper trance, like a deeper meditation, that's like 528 is the frequency of love and light for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you're manifesting, if you're, you want to work with alignment, truth. John Lennon's Imagine song was recorded at 528.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I tell you something about music.
No, I didn't know that. Yeah, there's quite a lot of artists that have gone that route. Quite a lot, and
Yeah.
they don't necessarily talk about it either.
No.
Like a lot of old music that you listen to is actually 432. Like like 80, 90 plus year old music is 432.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
And 528 has been, it is a love frequency, right? So it's, it's like the frequency of chlorophyll, like everything holds a certain frequency. So chlorophyll, our DNA is essentially 528.
Mm-hmm.
And when our body's out of alignment, say someone's got, a candida overgrowth, there's going to be different levels of candida within our body, but depending on the frequency of that level, you can shift it through music and sound, and that's where the Roth machine comes into play.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever experienced that?
No, I haven't played with one. I've never played with one. Yeah,
that's a really cool one. When they put it on your wrists and on your forehead, and on your ankles. It's pretty cool stuff.
So as a takeaway, guys, like, because obviously the average person, may or may not be able to get a sound bath right now.
Yeah.
But, people are listening to music right now, I'm sure more than ever before, being especially people who don't necessarily are in self-isolation without people in their lives. So is a takeaway from this that people should start exploring 432 and 428? I don't even know if there is 428. I guess John Lennon's Imagine.
528.
Sorry, 528. Should people start, should they hop on their whatever platform they're a part of and start checking out music and see how it makes them feel? Yeah,
like there's a lot on YouTube especially. But yeah, like I've never really looked in Spotify or iTunes for it, but I know for sure YouTube does have it. I don't know they may or may not be telling the truth about it, but there's definitely a lot of examples. There's actually guitarists and stuff like that who have done sort of an example of 432 versus 440, just to give you an idea of what the difference might be. It's definitely worth checking out.
There's a website called Mind Vibrations. I think it's Mind Vibration or Mind Vibrations, and they have it based on like Fibonacci sequences. Like when you guys asked me about what sort of logo would you use, say that sort of. So they'll have all the frequencies listed there. So if someone's wants to overcome pain or an illness or an element or love or manifest, it's all listed there. So they can have a little bit of they can either buy a sound, and it's best to listen to it with earphones. If you're listening to it like on a speaker, it's better to have it if you're using it for meditation. And there's lots on YouTube, but yeah, so it's best to kind of have it. Binary beats, I've been doing that a little bit over the last few months just to kind of help with sleep and some of the anxiety, and that's always a nice little treat too.
Yeah, you want to quickly, just before we get too far away from it, Leslie was asking and Lena was asking, what's the spelling of the Roth machine?
I want to say it's ROFF.
Okay. That should get people there.
And then thanks, Luke. I appreciate that. Yeah, jump in like that anytime. Lisa, how do your sound bowls work? Like before we jump off of frequency, how do your sound bowls work?
So I was trying to figure out how that sound, how that properly spelt that machine. Or it's the Ralph machine. It's not the Roth. Is it Ralph? Hold on a second. You guys are now gonna Ralph.
Yeah, and while you're looking that up, in terms of binaural beats, just so if people don't know what that is, so you see, I have earbuds in,
Yeah.
and binaural beats is essentially it's a form of neural field, or tapping into your brain's frequencies, and because these little buds and pretty much any headphones you could ever buy, and pretty much any sound system that you could ever buy, including the ones that we use for Rock the Park and massive shows like that, they cannot produce the frequencies in which our brain operates. So our brain, and Chris Wiley is a neuroplastician. He's the master at this kind of stuff. But the brain operates from basically 0 hertz to 20 hertz, which interestingly is where our hearing basically begins if you have exceptionally good hearing. But what you can do is entrain your brain waves. So the resonant frequency of the Earth, the Schumann resonance, which is basically the resonance between the Earth's surface and the ionosphere, is 7.4 something hertz. And that's like a good alpha state with your brain waves as well. So when we're resonating naturally with the Earth, we, like, again, this ties back into 432.
Yeah.
All of these things are part of that sympathetic vibration. It's part of the same scale, essentially. But what you're doing with binaural beats it's very interesting. And a friend of mine who basically runs a lab at McMaster University, he can go very deep into detail on this. His name is Runnell. I forget his last name, but he's a serious. He used to mix sound for Backstreet Boys and stuff like that. He's also someone I'd love to get on the show at some point.
Yeah, we talked about that. We should definitely.
Yeah, definitely. He's a super nice guy too. And so what you're doing with, in the left ear and the right ear, you're sending very slightly different tones or sounds. And just because speakers cannot produce 7 hertz or 5 hertz or 10 hertz, what interestingly happens if you send something like, say, 250 hertz to your right ear and 257 hertz to your left ear, in the middle in your brain, it resonates at 7 hertz, the difference between. And those numbers can be any number. I find they're better in the lower frequencies, but that's how binaural beats work. And it's very interesting that the sound waves will meet in the middle and then create a standing wave of the frequency in which you want to sync your brain waves with. So in that 7 hertz kind of range, that's like, and Chris can go, we'll go deep into this when we get Chris on the podcast, but that's like you're awake and alert but very calm. Like, it's a very nice sort of baseline to be at. And if you're trying to sleep, then you're going to work on the like 3-4 hertz kind of thing. And one thing to keep in mind, just because it's a rabbit hole that I went down personally myself with binaural beats, is that most of the stuff on YouTube is MP3 or it's compressed audio. What you want to do is find an app that generates pure tone. And the reason for this is because all of the jittery and all of the compression and the noise that gets into the binaural beats on YouTube, or even things that you can download from iTunes or on a CD, it introduces a lot of like weird jitters. And I've actually noticed that after doing it for quite a while, is my brain will, like, I'll pull them out, and then my brain is still hearing this kind of thing.
Wow.
And so I noticed that when it took a while, but I'll try and figure out what the app was called. I haven't used it for years, but someone had the same experience, and they literally built their own app that just is two pure tones, and then the within the app, you just set whatever frequency you want, and it adjusts the two tones in real time. So it much better that way.
So what's interesting about that is like crystal tones, there's different kinds of sound healing. Crystal tones alchemy bowls. The Rife machine is RIFE.
RIFE.
And so the crystal bowls, the crystal tones alchemy bowls is the highest quality quartz that you can get in a bowl in the world. So they're at like 99.9992% quartz.
Mm-hmm.
And and they're true toned to the actual sound of whatever that note is. So they've got a patent that works, that they essentially are the only ones that have the certain true tone. So what Luke was saying about hearing it, that you take it out, you're still kind of hearing it and you're feeling it throughout your body. That's what's happening with the resonance of those with those bowls, because essentially it's engulfing you in that resonance of your being. So when I'm playing them, there's some that are harmonic sets. I use it for healing and balancing, and just kind of balancing the chakra, the energy cycle, the energy points. What's really great is I use them as a harmonic set, but sometimes I'll look at who's coming to a sound bath. That's why I always kind of do my who's coming. You have to pre-register, because I want to see what I energetically tap into what everybody's kind of struggling with. And then I kind of put together a few different sound bowls to resonate. So just in that flow, and you play them. And essentially what happens is people feel it in different parts of their bodies. Some people will feel super suffocated. Some people will feel like they're being pinned down. Other people are just having an out-of-body experience. And it's just pure bliss, pure joy when they come out of it. So, they're pretty innovative tools as far as the intention and the integrity that's behind them. They're made in Utah by, I want to say, a team. The story of how they got created was Lapido. He owns Crystal Tones. He was in rehab for an addiction of some sort in late 1990s. And when he was in a meditation, he heard, "You're going to make crystal bowls." And it was the furthest from, that was not in his vicinity. Didn't even know what that was. And then a few years later, here he is, one of the biggest producer in the world. So again, they're made of pure quartz. So you can get lots online. They're not the same. Like when you hear a Tibetan bowl, those are usually pounded out so that they're not pure in the technology. They're not pure in the sound.
So here's a question, because there's people tuning in from all across the world, and obviously, we're just getting the podcast rolling, so a lot of it's centered in North America. Is there such a thing as going to someone that doesn't know how to do it properly? Like I feel like even in our industry, sometimes we'll quote someone a price on a show and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, I'll get back to you," and then they don't show up. Is there something that you can let people know about what they should look for when they want to start doing these sound bowl therapies? Like, is there a way to know, just do your research, or like should people be asking what kind of bowls they're using? Should they be asking, like, what should they be asking to know that they're going to get a positive experience? Because this is going to be something that's new for a lot of people, right? Like,
yeah,
they're not going to know, and God forbid they have a bad experience their first time out, they won't do it again, right? So what can you say about that?
So I don't really know how to answer that. I think that if you can go where love is, for sure, right? When it's done in integrity, when it's not done in ego, I think that when it's done in a state of bliss, people know where their heart's being led. So is there a bad sound bath versus a shitty sound bath? Or a good sound bath versus shitty? Yeah, I think that's based on how the practitioner can carry the space, right, and can hold. I've been in sound baths where based on the energy that's in the room, the sounds are going to, it's going to sound different. Yes, it's a harmonic set, but if someone's dealing with a lot more emotional, I'm going to say baggage, just for a lack of a better term, everybody in the room is affected by that, right? Because we all become one when we're in a resonance like that. So, Ryan, if you're in one corner and Luke is in another, and we've got Marco in another, and Lena's there, collectively we're evolving together. But if you've got somebody that doesn't know, is new to the whole gig per se, there'll be like a little bit of an equilibrium that takes place. So I've started doing beginner, intermediate, and advanced sound baths, only because I want to give. It won't be as long, and the frequency won't be as high when I play it, or for that longer duration, just to give people's being time to adjust to what's taking place. If I was just to go wild, people are vomiting after, they're unstable. It's literally shaking people to the core, and I've experienced it where people kind of float out of there. Other people have, they've vomited because we're releasing some of those emotions. So if it's suppressed, people are going to be vomiting. If it's like physical elements, they're going to have, diarrhea for a few days, and that's all of it's normal. It's almost like after a set, like a Reiki session, or after a massage, or, after people get dry mouth, right? We're shifting our vibration through a healing modality, and that's the truth with the sound.
So
is there?
Hang on one sec, not to interrupt, but this is making me think about something. So it's interesting that you say that, because, like, truthfully, very truthful, I've never done a sound bath. I've never done one, right? So I don't have the experience, but I should, and I will. And I think this is interesting when you say something like people are coming out of there and going to the washroom and throwing up and this kind of thing. I mean, that sounds negative, but I'm assuming it's a positive thing, and it's sort of shedding negativeness away. But this is interesting to me, that frequency, and I mean, I knew that it can affect you, of course, but frequency can affect you that much that it can cause you to throw up. Like that's a thing, right?
Yeah. Because people suppress themselves, right? So all those emotions, whether or not that's anxiety or fear, when you're in a space, like when I create a space like that, it's a healing environment, right? So whether or not the rooms, it's a sacred space. We're walking in there vulnerable and open to receiving. And some of it is, the fog that needs to go, or the chaos. And sometimes it's a purge that takes place, whether or not they're sweating or they're cold, or again, it's an all sort of different emotional realm that people go through. It's out of body experiences.
So something else that's frequency. So this is interesting. I'd like to know your take on something else then. Because we're talking about frequency for healing. So let's shift for a second. So if frequency can heal and shed in a positive way that causes, your body to do things that you didn't think it could do during that session, there's different people out there right now that are talking about the effects of wireless technology, and I'm interested to know. So there's, again, frequency can affect you, and it can affect you for healing. What's your take on, frequency for, on the more negative side? How can frequency come into your life that you don't want and negatively affect you? And what can people do what can they do, or what can they introduce? Because you're talking about like quartz crystal, and I know enough to know that quartz crystal is an amazing thing that can help heal. So what are some of the things, what are some of the different elements that people can bring into their home, put in their car, wear around their neck? What are some of the things they can do mentally, spiritually, whatever they have to do to protect themselves from, a lot of what's going on. And a lot of it is electromagnetic radiation, which,
Mhm.
we're in a pandemic right now. Well, there's a lot of studies that show that part of what we experienced with the Spanish flu was the dawn of electricity, right? There was a correlation there. And, it's a bit of a conspiracy theory in a sense, but there's been a lot of evidence with that, right around that exact same time, electricity was born. And humans, in terms of, we weren't used to that. Our cells were not used to, our immune systems were not used to taking that on. And a lot
Mhm.
of people, it weakened their immune systems. Electricity didn't kill them. That doesn't kill you. That's what people think. That's not how it works. But it affects your cells and how your cells work, and it lowers your immune system, because all of a sudden your body goes into fight or flight, going, "Oh my gosh, what is this? This is new." And so, right now there's all of this, call it conspiracy, call it whatever, around frequency. Some people call it, electromagnetic radiation. Some people will call it, whatever they want. There's all kinds of names, Wi-Fi, there's all kinds of things. But can you speak to what people can do, or what they can introduce in their lives to help, not, I wouldn't say, block would be a word, but help, get it away from them from a negative aspect?
So it's interesting because I have a dear friend I love, Veronica. She owns Sola Jewelry, and she comes to Sunfest. She comes here in London. She's online. She's incredible, and she had a bit of a health scare. I can't remember how many years ago. So she created jewelry that was based with the Fibonacci sequence, and shungite. Every piece that she makes is done in the Fibonacci sequence and with shungite. So there's some sort of quartz in every single one of her pieces, as well as shungite. So shungite is a black stone from Russia, and it basically eats up electromagnetic radiation. Where we look at it from a place of, or my take on it is that if we're increasing the frequency or radiation at that sort of magnitude consistently, when people can't handle a lot of sound, for example, for a long duration of time, what's that radiation doing? So we've started turning our Wi-Fi router off at night. Everything's turned off to airplane mode. And you can put shungite crystals throughout. You can get shungite powder. I've had some contractors ask me to source that for them, and they've painted a wall in their house. So say in your office space, there's a ton of modems. You can paint one wall with paint with shungite powder in it. So it basically, all the yucky stuff goes to that wall. You can't do it on all four walls or a combination, because essentially everything will just get turned off. So something along those lines are probably the best that they can do or bring in. So turning off like Wi-Fi routers when you're asleep, it's not necessary. We had her come. She stayed with us one night, one weekend for Sunfest, and Lydia has a really hard time sleeping in her bedroom. And she's going to be 11, and we've moved into this place in 2017, and her room is right in the corner of the house. So she's got a window and then a window into the piece. So it's always like colder and just doesn't feel good. And she's got a radiation machine, or one that detects energy, and she went out throughout the house. And sure enough, Lydia's was the highest radiation, that had the most radiation in the house, was Lydia's room. Wow. So whether or not she was sensing that, she couldn't sleep, she would have wild sleeps. So I put, I gridded her room. I gridded her room with clear quartz and shungite. Made a little beautiful little grid underneath her mattress, and she's been sleeping great. Amazing. She would like sneak out. She would sneak out to sleep with Simon or us, and so it was just really bizarre sort of thing. So the Fibonacci sequence, if you can bring any sort of that sort of frequency into the home, whether or not that's again through sound or a crystal grid, it's God's language, right? So that sort of help. And she's like, I think her website is loveisola.com. I'll actually connect the two of you or I'll connect the two of
Yeah,
you.
please. And we'll post the
You'd
link in the comments as well once you get it over to us.
Yeah. You'll, you know that big fat necklace that I wear?
Yep.
That's her work. And it's super distinctive work. And it's highly, highly, highly healing. It's, when I first wore it, it took me about 4 hours to get grounded with it because I could feel myself swaying. I thought, and I didn't know a lot about her jewelry. And I was like, what's happening to me? And it's just the power of prayer and the power of just the authenticity that she puts into her pieces. It's beautiful.
Speaking of grounding, Luke, you got that grounding mat under your feet there?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Why don't you talk about that? Why don't you tell people what a grounding mat does?
Well, here, I don't know if it'll pick it up. So this mat, it basically feels like a mouse pad, but it's got carbon in it as well, so it's actually conductive. And this little button here, so on the other end of this cord is a grounding plug. So it's just imagine your usual plug at home. It's got the 3 prongs, the 2 slots, and a round one. It's just basically the round one, and what that does is connects you to the earthing in your electrical system, which is not as good as pounding a rod deep into the ground outside and running a wire direct. Of course, that's a lot. That's difficult depending on where you live and your situation. But there's a resistor in there just in case there's like a lightning strike and a surge of power through the the grounding system. So you're completely safe. I think it's a 100,000 ohms. I think it is, but it's enough that the flow of electrons, or to put it simply, is not impeded. But if something spikes, it's not going to kill you. So don't just go stick a wire in your grounding port and wrap your hand in it, because it could kill you.
Yeah, no, get a proper grounding mat.
Yeah, they're not cheap. Maybe we'll find a source for a cheaper version of it, but I think that grounding pad was $60 or $70. But it's money well spent, because essentially what's happening when all of these electromagnetic fields around you, like right now, there's 3 computers and 4 computer monitors around me right now running the streams, and I'm just super sensitive to it. I figured this out many years ago, and like some people who have worked with me will see me while I'm at the audio console. I'll actually have this thing either where the hand rest is or under my feet, and I'll stand on it barefoot, just because of the amount of electromagnetic radiation that you encounter at a live show, especially standing beside a big mixing console and wireless microphones and this, that, and the other thing. And it happens at home too. Don't get me wrong, it happens at home just as powerfully, because we all have multiple routers and phones and computers, and there's cell towers outside, there's the neighbors wireless, there's everything. Like I own some meters, and it's crazy the amount of radiation. But what happens is that energy, if it doesn't have anywhere to go, like to ground, is that it's actually going to be sitting in vibration in your, it's like, when you put on a super staticky shirt, it feels gross, it's clingy, but it just feels gross.
Yeah.
So that's because of that energy has nowhere to go, and it's basically dissipating into your cells. And somebody to look up is Dr. Martin Pall, Pall, Martin Pall. He basically many years ago, working on something completely different. I think he was working on a heart medication. But he had basically figured out that even very low level electromagnetic radiation would resonate with a certain part of the cell, and it's called a voltage gated calcium channel. And essentially what that does is there's your body signals everything going on electrically. So that particular resonant frequency is the frequency to tell that gate to open up. And what happens there, and this is why the argument against, well, it doesn't heat the skin, or it's not ionizing radiation, therefore it's safe, falls apart. Because even at extremely low levels, it opens up this voltage gated calcium channel. And what happens is millions per second, I think it's about 7 million ions of calcium. So gated calcium channel. So it lets calcium ions into the cell at an extremely high rate, and it'll just sit open. So you're constantly filling your cells with these bits of calcium. And what that does is cause oxidative stress in an extreme way. And that oxidative stress can actually, there's a bunch of things that sort of cascade together, but that oxidative stress will actually break your mitochondrial DNA, which is something we've never experienced as a humanity since, until wireless technology was brought forth in the last 100 years or so. So we're definitely playing with fire when it comes to these electromagnetic fields, because even like while you're sitting there right now, that's happening. Your cells are being opened and flooded with calcium ions. One of the things that I do to counter this is pretty high dose magnesium, because there's kind of a push and pull. So magnesium is like a relaxing, the calcium is a constricting. So they're kind of opposite charge. So that's, I use magnesium bicarbonate, which I make myself. I can go into how to make that later. I do, yeah.
That's awesome.
Kyle said that's the only magnesium that he's ever tried that he could feel. Brian's brother, Kyle. It's simple. Sorry.
So to backtrack a little bit to Ryan's initial question about to me about the lungs and COVID. Again, it's all that extra energy and all that extra frequency and radiation. It literally is at our oxygenated state. So what's happening to our breath? We can't breathe. Right?
Yeah.
So,
when you're also just, like when it comes to dealing with a virus load, like a viral load in general, like you definitely don't want to have a bunch of oxidative stress in your system while you're trying to fight something. This is why we say, cut out sugar. Like, don't be really, really, really careful, even with fruit. Be really careful when it comes to sugar. Make sure your body's in a more alkaline state. Make sure you're getting fairly high doses of, and this is, something that I say I'm doing. Like everyone, I can't tell anyone what to do. I'm not a doctor, but these are the things that I'm doing. And high dose vitamin C and chaga and stuff like that, you're basically trying to reduce the amount of oxidative stress. And then going back to the grounding mat is while you're grounded, and going back to the shungite, and I can't speak to the efficacy on that because I've never done experiments with it, but I have done experiments with different like one company in particular is the Aries Shield, AIRES, Aries Technologies. They have quite a lot of research and proof, in terms of different white papers, but you can basically test it yourself. Like our good friend Chris Wiley did a bunch of tests with it with yeah, there you go. Ryan's got it. Well, hold on, Ryan. Let me put you up on screen there. If you could get it to show up.
Hold it closer.
There you go. Yeah, so the Aries Shield Pro, I have one on my phone. My wife has one on her phone. Like I have a big badass version of that upstairs that just kind of holds it together, in general upstairs where there's more EMF. But these things, and I've heard a lot about shungite, so I'm not going to discount it. But there's ways that you can test it. One easy way is heart rate variability. So you can basically put somebody in a chamber that's free of electromagnetic radiation, and then you're basically measuring the heart rate. And essentially, it's kind of counterintuitive, but the more metronomic, so the more steady the pace of the heart, it's worse. So you want actually some variability in terms of your heartbeats. So you can actually do some really, really interesting, like, minute sensitivity tests with very low level radiation. And you can tell the difference between zero radiation and even low level. And then it gets crazy when you get into the higher levels. Like Chris has done it with doing cell phones up against the head, which you should never, ever do. Like, just read the documentation of the phone companies themselves. Like Apple says, keep it 12 centimeters from your head when you're
There's a reason
talking.
why they include a pair of earphones with every phone.
Yeah. And
So
even that's not great because you're filtering all of that right into your ears.
Sorry, is that what's your take on the earbuds then? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, there's, you can, like, in these, like, I'm connected to an interface and everything's grounded, so it's less of an issue with that. But when you're connected to your phone and your earbuds, yeah, you're basically sending all of that electromagnetic radiation right to your right, like, into the holes in your head. Like, it's definitely not a great thing. But what they have is, how a stethoscope works. It's a tube. It's a rubber tube that the sound travels. So people have actually developed pretty decent, and they're not very expensive at all, but they're basically like a stethoscope kind of thing, where you have the speaker is in the cord, essentially, at the speaker or at the phone, and then the sound travels up a tube that's non-conductive. So you're actually not getting any of the radiation traveling down the cord. So that's one option. But the other option, which I use, is I'll just put it on speakerphone and then go to like, I'll put the phone actually on a surface, so I'm not holding it. And I'm not. It's not like I'm 100% on top of that all the time, every single time, in terms of, like, not holding it. But it's been many, many, many years since I've held a phone right up to my head. And I, like, for me, like, I could feel it right away. Like, I remember the first laptop I got. I was like, why would you put this on your lap? It hurts. Like, it really hurts. Like, it feels like there's knives digging into my bone marrow. Like, why would someone ever put this on their lap? And I think it's just people's sensitivity to it. Like, I've had some various health issues over the years, so I think I'm just a little more sensitive to it. But and that's why I know a lot about this stuff, is because I've been trying to research in what I'm doing to mitigate the effects. And that's why having a grounding mat, having the Aries shield on my phone and my computer and everything else, all of these things are a lot better than not doing anything at all. Are they perfect? Is it like, living 150 years ago, where there was no electrical grid, there was no wireless communications, none of this stuff? The only frequency, aside from, like, all of the frequencies of the sun, but the predominant frequency that people would resonate with on Earth would be the Schumann frequencies, that 7.4 whatever hertz. So, like, we've essentially, if you could imagine going to a concert or something, and there's like a violin player playing quietly in the corner, that's all well and good if there's no other sound going on. But as soon as someone starts dragging a trash can across the floor, and the air conditioner turns on, and people start talking, and all this other noise, all of a sudden you can't really make out what the violin is playing. And so that's kind of where we're at with the Schumann resonance, and why we're so off center, and why we're so off balance, is because it's impossible to hear this. We don't hear it. It's electromagnetic, not acoustic. But in terms of our brains being able to resonate with that frequency, it's buried. So you can't actually resonate with it. There's a website in I believe it's a research place based in Russia, but they publish the Schumann resonance. They just have an ongoing graph, and a lot of people, it's something I've heard many times in the sort of woo-woo or spiritual community, is that the Schumann resonance is changing. Like, the Schumann resonance is spiking, and it's not like the Schumann resonance is not changing. It hasn't changed. But what people are looking at on these graphs is you can see there's a straight line going across, and that's the Schumann resonance. But then there's all sorts of like noise all around it, and it's not the Schumann resonance freaking out. It's simply just the noise of the apparatus that's measuring the Schumann resonance, hearing, quote unquote, hearing a bunch of noise. And that could be anything. That could be, like, interestingly, a friend of mine showed me the graph in terms of, I think it was several days ago. There was a global meditation.
Yeah, Saturday. So collectively, they want to get 1 million people meditating at the same time. So it started at 10:45 Eastern Standard Time for us, obviously. So whatever that is, and it's actually quite, it's actually quite elevated. Like, you can see it throughout, and we were.
Well,
like,
it's not the, see, this is the thing that's interesting. Is it like we don't have an effect on the Schumann resonance. The Schumann resonance, it can only be affected if the ionosphere changes size, which it doesn't do. It does locally when certain entities use different energy directed stuff like HARP, HAARP. What they're doing is they're snapping the ionosphere with they're superheating it with electromagnetic radiation and stuff like that. Like, that's a good rabbit hole to go down. But the actual Schumann resonance has not changed in as long as we've been measuring it. But again, it's like a microphone. Like, if you have a violin playing a steady note, the note can remain steady, but the microphone can still pick up other noise around it. So what you're doing is you're looking at this measurement device, looking at the Schumann resonance, and the Schumann resonance kind of goes away because the noise is louder than the actual resonance. But I said to my friend, I was like, well, all of that noise could be something like lightning. It could be different, other man-made sort of things like harp, that kind of thing. But it also could be that if 1 million plus people are meditating, you're actually seeing, and it's, again, not changing the Schumann resonance at all, but you can actually measure that energy being synced and produced by human beings collectively doing that all at the same time. It's like why, with sound systems, why things get much louder as you add speakers. It doesn't just get a little louder every speaker you add. So everything works together. It's why singing with a singing bowl is so powerful, because resonant frequency, that's why all of these frequencies are so dangerous, because it doesn't need to be, a lot of energy. When you start resonating with it, then things add up exponentially very quickly. So like because if you look at the time, exactly. So yeah, so right? the intention is okay, are we meditating to get super focused and really like high energy and high focus and really high brainwave frequency, or do we want to relax? Do we want to create space? Do we want to meditate on like being grounded and being in our center, in our alpha waves? If we are collectively doing that intention is basically like the band is all playing the same note, so everyone is adding into this thing together. And I don't know, because I don't think we'll ever know, but it certainly looked like on that graph that my friend was showing me, shout out to Darren, he's like, hey man, it like literally lines up to the minute when people started this.
It was we were it was the World Yoga Association basically sent out some guidelines to say, collectively gather your people, and then it kind of structured from that. And I had a small virtual sound bath on Saturday too, to partake in it. And it literally is down to like the minute of what was happening. It was like 24 minutes or something, or 20 minutes or something that we all went. Mine went a little bit over, but it literally is that power of intention, right? That's what's going to shift the consciousness.
Yeah, and I think that that's exactly right. Like when you get enough people, like here's I was going to bring it up earlier. One of the most profound experiences I've ever had in my life was it was a little 1-day retreat up north, and it was kicked off with, it was, I don't know, massive, like it was the size of me around this massive sound bowl, singing bowl, and it was fairly low frequency, like very, like, had a good, like, feel to it, good strength to it. And they started, and it was my first time ever being there, but like everyone else, as soon as they started with the bowl, everyone just went, at whatever frequency was with it. And by the time I kind of figured out everyone was doing that, and I was kind of late to the party, I was like, oh, okay, sing along with it. Cool. Like, we're going to do this. So this is going to be a thing that we're going to do together. Okay, cool. And I literally took a deep breath in, and even without trying to hit a note, all I did was exhale. And it was like I was locked in with that note, because it was like, I've done sound for like some of the loudest bands in the world, like I know what loud is, and I know what thick is, I know what bass is, and several people could attest to that. But
it was interesting.
It was the loudest thing, and the physically the most vibration, and the most pleasant. Like, it was just this amazing feeling, but it was because everyone was doing it together. And I think that's what happens with like a global meditation. It's not with sound, it's with electromagnetic frequencies that our brains emit. Like our hearts emit a field way outside of our body. Our brains emit fields that you can measure from, like very, they're not as powerful as a heart, but they're still there, and you can still measure them without actually going into the brain. You can measure in 3D what's going on with the brain in terms of how things are talking to what other parts of the brain and all this kind of stuff. But it's energy. It's the same energy that our cell phones use, that our Wi-Fi uses. It's the same energy as light. Like, we actually do emit light. That's why you can see people on like infrared cameras, because they emit light. We're humans. Hue, as in like bright, like the color. Humans, like, we're light beings. Like, you've heard the term light being before. Like, that's where it's, and it, like, people, a lot of people don't know that our cell phones, the radiation from that is the exact same thing as light. So it's just a different frequency. It's just a much lower frequency. So all of these, and with our brains, it's just a much, much, much lower frequency.
Once we get back to like running, I'll have a little private invite only sound bath for you guys, and I'll get my best ones going. It'll be a little bit of an underground. I've had some people message me saying, can you please coordinate something? Like, we'll do it 6 feet apart, please. Let's just do it. So, because it's so
Black
necessary.
market sound baths.
Well, I can, I've got a couple places we could do that at. It's interesting because I recorded my first sound bath with Aaron at
Charterhouse Studios.
Yeah. And it was interesting because even when he's like, yeah, I got this. And then he's like, what is happening? Because he's into a little bit of a trance, kind of being like, what is happening? And I was leading a meditation, and he was recording it, and you kind of just get suckered into the sound and being like, you're in bliss. And he's like, oh, I gotta be doing something here. It's pretty wild, right? Because you come, it's like, what just happened in there? So I think that there's positivity in that, right? For sure. To honor that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, before we get too far along here, because we want to get to, if there's any, if anybody has any questions, we want to get to some of the questions and stuff. I know that Lisa, you wanted to touch on some stuff to do with astrology. Why don't we get into a bit of that? Talking about there was a pink supermoon the other night. What's the, is there an an astrological
Well,
significance to that? And to further that, what other things coming up should people be conscious of as far as that goes?
so if anybody has any questions about astrology that's like watching even too, like, send a message or send me a message privately if that's be. But, I wanted to touch on the astrology for basically what's happening around us right now with the COVID.
Right.
But for the pink moon, every moon has a name, right? Whether or not it's the wolf moon in the winter. This particular one was the pink moon, which in some spaces it was pink just because of the way that, the earth and the sun and the moon aligned. But it's basically because the pink flowers come up. And then, May is called the flower moon, just because they've been given names and those names don't change. April is always flower or pink moon, May is, and so forth. So the supermoon, what happens with the supermoon is that it's the closest to the earth. And they usually happen in threes, in a frequency in states of threes. So we had one in March, now in April, and then in May we'll have them. So it went full, like all three full moons were closest to the sun, closest to the earth. So it's basically like 350,000 kilometers or something away from the earth. So that's why it's so big in the sky, because it's the closest to the earth that we will see this year. This one will be the biggest one that we could see this year. In latter part of November, if you can remember the fall, we had like three really, really big ones. I can't remember the exact dates of them. But that's essentially it. It's when the earth and the moon and the sun align, and it's the largest and the brightest in the sky. Yeah.
Cool.
That's all. This one was in Libra. So based on where the moon is, and so the moon, from a metaphysical or esoteric sort of teaching, the moon, or if you're doing an astrology chart, the moon represents our emotions. It represents, if someone was reading their sign or their chart and they look up where the moon is placed, that's the placement of your emotions. So the moon is super watery and flowy, a bit unstable. And that's essentially when the moon is full. That's where the word lunatic comes from. It's la lune, right? So when it's nice and big, it's this big bright light shining on the darkness. So if you look at that for ourselves, there's a big light looking at our wounds or our shadow selves. And that's why people tend to be a little bit more emotional.
Right.
Yeah.
So here, like, it's interesting because, like, when I was growing up, I was not really into astrology at all. I mean, it just wasn't a thing. And then, but yet I know that I'm a Taurus, right? And I know that I was like born in the year of the, was I born in the year of the rat, I think? But anyway, it's, so, even now I'm still, not up to speed on what I should be. And I think it's interesting because people, the average person will go, oh, that, that stuff about, astrology cards and moon significance and all this stuff, like it's all, it's all BS, but yet people still identify as a Taurus or a Sagittarius or whatever. So I think people just don't, again, it goes back to this whole COVID thing. Like people just don't understand it. So, it's confusing, right?
Yeah. It's just it was so taboo. Farmers actually use lunar cycles to plant. Some plants and herbs and fruits and vegetables do better when they're planted, whether or not that's at the balsamic moon phase or the new moon phase. If anybody follows, nutrition or food growth, they follow moon cycles. Farmers follow moon cycles. Midwives, there has to be 9 full moons in a gestational period. So if someone says, hey, I'm pregnant, I'm like, hey, great. When did you conceive? Oh, this date. That's why I could like pin Lena's date down. So I was like, there's 9. This is when it's going to happen. Right. So
I think you actually, because my daughter's born on Valentine's Day, I think you joked about that at one point. You're like, you know what? I think she's going to be born on Valentine's Day, or I think, she's going to be born near Valentine's Day. And I mean, you nailed it, right? So okay.
Yeah. So that's where I downplay some of that stuff. But again, that's my intuition, right? I'm connected. My Wi-Fi channel is pretty clear to source. So I think that,
because you turn your router off.
Right. And that's why I turn my router off. Yeah. Sometimes I do. I just don't want to hear it. Sometimes I don't want to know, So, but I think for moon cycles, there are, from a ritual standpoint, full moons are about harvesting, releasing, celebrating. New moons tend to be like resetting. If it's a balsamic moon phase, there's no moon, it's all dark, right? So that's where people kind of tend to go a little bit more inward.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty fun stuff.
I mentioned the cards. Like, do you use, astrological cards? Like, do you have decks and stuff that you use?
Yeah. So, the center might have some. Yeah. So there's all sort of like we're not going to go too deep, but there's all different kinds of decks you can use. Like tarot is one of the most older forms of card reading, divinational tools. If someone's just starting out, I'd recommend like a fairy card or an angelic card, an affirmation. Something that's a little bit lighter in the field. Oracle tends to be like channeled per se. So somebody created an oracle deck. So it's basically based on their own intuitions. Tarot follows the major arcana and the minor arcana, which has been, if we go back to the history of tarot, it was in the 14th century when monks would use, they would actually use playing cards, and then it actually developed into this playing card meant that. Well, then they gave it to an artist, and the artist created it and then turned it into the fool or turned it into the magician, and then so forth goes that way. So tarot always follows the same sort of principles. The traditional tarot deck will have 78 cards, and then followed by the suits, which is elements, fire, earth, water, and air, whether or not that's through a cup or a sword or a wand. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And they're all pretty, you get what you get, Well, how does that go?
How can, with everything that's going on right now, some people out there, are into this stuff and have time. If they order online, they order a set of cards, how can this provide them some guidance or some enlightenment right now with everything that's going on? What can that do for people?
Well, it can give them a sense of direction, so that they're getting out of their mind. It's best used when you're, again, doing it from a heart-centered space or a grounded space. If you're doing it from a place of chaos, the reading's going to get chaotic, right? So it's just really giving themselves a time out. So, and again, they can connect to spirit, they can connect to a spirit guide, they can connect to like a channel that's outside of themselves.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Trying to think if I have a fun one. If I have an easy one here, but Luke's like, Lise, we're down to the wire on time. This is way past my bedtime, by the way. So I wanted to we had a really big thing happen with, so there's different planets. Astrology is planets that are in the sky, right? So each planet has a different meaning behind it. Mercury retrograde always gets a really bad rap because Mercury retrograde is the planet of communication. So when it goes retrograde, it tends to be like it's not going in its regular state of direction. So it's retrograde because it's going in the opposite sort of direction. And retrograde doesn't really go backwards. It just kind of does like a little bit of a squiggly line to the sky. But if we think about it, when it's in retrograde, our communications are off. So that's when, people aren't as concise with their communication. So always, People don't love to slow down. So whenever they hear Mercury is going in retrograde, they have to slow down because they can't do things on the fly. Their communication's off.
Right.
What's really neat is Jupiter is all about abundance, and it's the ruler of like the heavens. And it's going conjunct again Pluto. And some people don't even believe that Pluto's a planet. It's a dwarf planet. Well, Pluto represents death.
Wow. I didn't know.
Right? So from a place of expansion, right? And a place of essentially rebirth. If you think of abundance, the planet of rebirth and opportunities is going against death. And it's like, what's happening? So what paradigms need to die? Right? Where do we have to like reset some of our structures? So
Amen.
This happens every like 12 to 13 years. So it just happened April the 4th. So we're going to have another spout of this in June, and then another spout of it in November the 30th. So mark your agendas if you're in tune to this sort of thing, because it's like we're asking ourselves, what do I need? Who am I? What belongs? What no longer belongs? Who no longer belongs? What decluttering am I doing? And mark your calendars on those days, because you're going to be clearing out your garage. You're going to be clearing out your friggin' wallets, getting rid of stuff that just needs to go. And Pluto brings a sense of destruction, right? So that's kind of something that is big, because some of the biggest weekends of darkness was this last weekend, right? So, from the astrology standpoint, a lot of astrologists are like, these 3 big weekends are essentially the biggest ones.
Wow.
So inviting us to look at our abundance, celebrate. We are abundant.
Oh yeah, for sure. Definitely.
Right? With grace, and not just like finance, but we're not even talking about prosperity. It's like abundance of love and of trust and of grace and of peace, and bring that sort of expansion in. So if you're going to focus on anything, it's literally, how can I bring myself, like, what resiliency have you discovered within yourself or about yourself over these last couple of weeks?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Luke, do we have any questions that we still have to get to there, or are we good?
I'll mention a question real quick. I answered it in the chat, but Leslie asks, in terms of laptops, she has a lead fabric equivalent, which in brackets prevents X-ray penetration. Would that absorb frequency EMF and whatever energy from passing into my lap? And yes, that definitely will. Again, it depends on the fabric, depends on the like, is it grounded, is it not grounded, that kind of thing. The best advice that I have in terms of that is get a meter, or get someone who has a meter and just test. Because sometimes things are counterintuitive, and you don't want to have a false sense of protection, thinking that you can sit with this laptop on your lap all day and you're not getting any radiation. So just test. Like, that's why, again, I'm always hesitant to really promote something like shungite, because I've not done the test myself. I've never seen anyone do the test. I'm not saying that it doesn't work, but I've never done the test myself, so I can't verify. Where with the Airy Shield stuff, it's probably a lot more money, but there's an outstanding amount of tests that's been done, and I've done tests myself, and people that I trust have done tests themselves. So just know what you're doing with it. Any other questions? I think that was it for now.
Cool.
I pulled us some cards for fun.
Oh, all right, let's do it. What do you got?
So I pulled easy breezy ones, so no one's offended by it. Doesn't hurt anybody's feelings, but they won't, because it's me and I'm a deliverer of hope. So these are a sacred creator deck that I have. They're used for, I use it for my events, like if I'm planning something or if I'm marketing something or whatever. Anyways, so you know how we were talking about abundance? And I said the planet, we're here on abundance, right? Like we are. So basically it's prosperities. I don't know if you can see it. Can you guys see it?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so prosperities sisters are happiness and joy. So remember how I talked about we're in love or we're in fear? The only way energetically and emotionally and spiritually to get from fear over love is through gratitude and joy. Ultimately, sometimes gratitude and joy is a bit far-fetched, depending on where we are on our ascension process. So in this card, it really is bring in joy. So if you're focusing on anything, what feels good? You know, like how do you want to feel? And it's like literally set a clear intention for how you want your life to look, and look at the big picture from a happiness and a joy standpoint. And that's prosperity. So that's one.
Amazing.
Any question? Is that okay?
Yep, that's great.
So there's 4 elements. Earth, which is grounding, right? Air, which is our mental state. Water, which is heart, love, so forth. And then fire, which is passion, perseverance, creativity, orgasms, all that kind of stuff. So I pulled creator fire. So it's all about literally sitting in perseverance, determination, excitement, do the work.
Yeah.
You're safe, right?
Yeah.
It's incredible. I've got we have a music store and we're selling online, and people who normally would never play guitar are buying guitars. People who, have never made music before are buying, sound cards and keyboard controllers. It's just, the amount of creative, pun intended, the creative fire that's going on right now is crazy.
Yeah, it's so good. I have been, like, you can't really show you, but my whole wall here, I don't know, that's probably like 3 feet. It's like covered with Post-it, like I've got 5 different colored Post-it notes, all different sizes, because it's just my modules for my courses, right? It's just finally I'm shifting gears. So another one is bravely market your magic. So you're safe to like literally market your magic. I get lots of funny messages from people when I spell magic with a K. And they're always like, you spelled magic wrong.
That's evil. That's the evil way of spelling magic.
It's actually, it's ritual, right? It's ritual. And the thing is that we're lacking is ritual in our life. We're lacking sacredness and intention. And intention is ritual. So it doesn't necessarily have to be like black magic ritual. It's still a mantra and affirmation, that sort of idea. Okay, I got one more. I'm gonna pull 4. Lucky 4. So I pulled overrate your intuition. So literally, we don't really see with our 2 eyes. We're seeing with our 3rd eye. So really trust your intuition as you're moving yourself forward. Right?
Excellent. They're all very relevant.
They're all really, really relevant. And this is the stack of cards that I pulled from. So I didn't strategically pull those out, but I missed one. But so I wrote a book called Just the Tip.
I love it.
You wrote a book called Just a Tip? Amazing.
So I actually talk about pivot. The end of February, I was going to print it into a print. So now I'm actually redoing it to an online course. And it's all about just the tip of your intuition, learning about your intuition, gaining that clarity and that connection. So through 10 tips under 15 minutes a day. So just the tip.
Awesome. I
love it. I love
That's
it.
incredible.
Yeah, thanks.
So if we had to summarize this up into some bullet points, because in every episode I like to do 2 things. I like to give people a challenge, and I like to also kind of give them some simple takeaways that they can implement in this current time that we are in with all of the time that we have. What would you say some of those bullet points are, Lisa?
So I would have people look inward and ask themselves 2 questions. One being, What strength or resiliency have you discovered about yourself? So, what strength and resiliency have you discovered about yourself during this time? And the second one would be like, where, we have to look inward. So, where are you struggling internally? Where is that internal struggle? Because again, we can be in anger, we can be in fear, we can be in denial, or we can be in growth. And I think that where we can look inward and honor, right, with no judgment and no shame, some of those struggles, I think that's where we can prosper the most, right? So really looking at the resiliency that we have as a community, as a family, as friends, and really allowing help to come in. Like for me, my mom's in her 60s, but she won't allow me to go grocery shopping for her. Like, she's just like, well, no, you can't go. Like, she's healthy, she's mobile. Like, it's not, it's let me help you. Like, you aren't to do that. So I think that we have to allow help in as a society and as a community and kind of come together. So I'd look at celebrate the resiliency, celebrate your strength, and honor the struggle with zero judgment.
Amazing.
That would be mine.
Luke, do you have any takeaways for people here from the show?
Yeah, you got to protect yourself. Like you really, it does take a little work, but you can do it. It takes, a bit of research, and now we have the time. And going back to the rituals, like building that magic in your life and building those rituals in your life. Now we have time to do it, and it's not an easy time. Like none of this stuff is easy. No one said it would ever be easy, but you have to take the time now to, like it's one of the hardest things to do, even right now with me, is just keeping a schedule, because there's not a lot of structure to what's going on in the outside world. So we're kind of left to our own devices. But now is the time to, like put in the work, like put in that work in terms of, making sure you're in bed at the right time, and you're, staying away from blue light at night, and you're, like I need to take my own advice very much on this in terms of, proper sleep and getting proper exercise and stuff like that. And we all have similar sort of issues, whether it's family that can throw off a schedule, or just if you're in isolation right now, like some people, like they don't even know what time it is or what day it is, or like how many days ago did I shower? Like, there's this immense opportunity in space to really build a ritual that works for you and gets you into a resilient space where you can handle these kind of things, like where you can handle a global pandemic, and like, you can come out on the other side in terms of like you now have this ritual that you can build the foundation of where you go from here. So I would say that's a big one.
Yeah, I created a 3-page PDF. If anybody wants it, they can DM me or send me a message with their email address, and I'm happy to send that out to them. It's just a super short, easy, like a few habits, ritual ideas. Nice, sweet, and basic. Nothing too convoluted. I'd probably encourage it not to be during these times. And just some new moon, full moon information. But if anybody wants it, I'm happy to send that to them. For sure.
Amazing. Thank you. Wow, that was a lot of information, you two. Just to kind of give a bit of a slight recap. My wife turns her phone on to airplane mode at night, and I don't, and I should. And that's definitely something I heard that I'm going to implement. turning off the noise. You know, I've been preaching to my mom, to my everybody, to everybody I know, to just turn off the news, turn off the major media, turn off, you know, and I don't have nothing against them. It's not that. It's just that negativity, that constant negativity. It's just mind numbing. And honestly, with everything we've just spoken about positivity and positive energy and clearing out old stuff and moving forward, and you know, the fact that we're light beings and we want to shine our light as bright as we can, you know, we can't submit to things like that and accept those things as being our reality. We need to move forward and be better and bigger than all of that, and push forward into the, you know, what will be the new world. And you know, we talked about it early on, but it is going to be very different in a lot of ways, and some you may not recognize right away, but they'll be there, and they'll be better. You know, have no fear. There'll be things that we come out of this in that are better. Binaural beats, very cool. Look it up online. It's very cool technology. And 432-528, very, very positive frequencies. Me and Luke, obviously, as Luke talked about, we've done a bunch of research on 532 and how that affects music. And we're very passionate about that. I love the cards that you pulled. The cards are amazing, and Luke's right. They're very relevant to the time. So, you know, joy, creative fire, market your magic, overrate your intuition. And it's just, you know, great, just amazing. I love the fact that you have a book called Just the Tip, for the record.
Thanks. Of course I did, right?
Yeah.
But actually, I don't know if, did I tell you how I came up with the name?
No.
So just cut me off if it's too much, but you never know with me, right? You never know with me. So I did an ayahuasca ceremony in 2019. What year are we in right now? 2020. So 2000. Yeah. So I went out to Arizona, and I led a few sound baths and a few sessions and helped people process through an ayahuasca ceremony. So I did it myself. And I thought, well, I don't really need to do it. I can connect to spirit pretty well. And so anyways, I ended up doing, taking Mother Aya, and the shaman had said to me, Lisa, do you want the full amount? Do you want, like, how are you feeling? And I said, oh, just the tip. And I thought, like, shaman. So I got in trouble. Like, I didn't get in trouble. I was just like, Lisa, you can't say that to a shaman. I was like, well, it is, because it's just enough sometimes.
That's awesome.
Anyway, so I wrote that down, and it just stuck for, you know, and really it's just the tip of the iceberg, right? With what I wrote about and the ritual ideas and the tips that I give in there. It's just my favorite top 10. And that's kind of where the name came from.
That's amazing.
And I won't share the rest, but
that's all good. We also talked about, you know, grounding mats, shugnite, different types of jewelry. What was the name of that company again, Lisa? The jewelry.
I love Isola.
Isola, amazing. Aries Shield.
I shared it in a.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
Aries
love
Shield Pro.
ISOLA.
What is it? Sorry, Luke.
I love ISOLA.com.
Perfect. And Luke, I love the fact that you brought up Dr. Martin Paul. I think everybody, my challenge in this episode is go and check out Dr. Martin Paul's research. I really would like you to do that. And I think it's important that you understand what's going on with electromagnetic radiation in your life. And if you choose, even after knowing, again, like in the last episode, I talked about, you know, doing research on what's in the products that you put in and on your body. And my challenge was, you know, go and learn what those are. And if you choose after knowing to still put those things in and on your body, I'm cool with it. It's great. No problem. But I just want an informed society. I want an informed community of people, of humans walking the earth, knowing the truths, right? And that's what we're birthing into right now, is we want the truths. And I think that his research will give you some clarity in terms of what's going on in the world of electromagnetic radiation. And so let's you know, look into that. And I make that a challenge. And to be perfectly honest with you, you know, I haven't done the full extent of what you've done, Luke, in terms of checking out his research. So I'm going to do that myself. So yeah, amazing. And so Lisa, if people want to connect with you, if they want to seek you out to help them through this time, through anything they're going that's going on in their life, because I know I've had again a number of people reach out to me because we're in where we are here in Canada, we're into like almost week 4, and so people are starting to get a bit restless. They're starting to get, there's some mental things starting to happen, and they're looking for someone to reach out to. And I think you'd be a great source for some people. How would they connect with you?
So either through Instagram at 9 of Water, or my website, or on Facebook, and just a simple DM. Lots of information on my website too, but just a simple DM is sufficient to get started.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I think from what I heard you say earlier about, what I heard through that whole explanation when I asked you earlier about what it takes to find a person that's good at doing sound bowl healing and sound baths. I think it's with all of the stuff we've talked about. I think it's trust and it's love and you don't know that through a computer necessarily. In terms of like, looking at a website, I think you have to, do what we're doing now. You have to be face to face with a person and you have to get a feeling, right? And I think everybody needs to listen to their gut when it comes to that with anyone who you're starting a relationship with, whether it's, someone like yourself that's looking to help them heal, or whether it's, a service company that's going to cut your grass. Like, you know in your gut whether this person is legit or not, and if if you vibrate with them or not. And so I think it's important you're right, for them to not only DM you but to connect with you. I know right now we're doing the whole this social distancing thing, but I think this type of thing where you can go on a video chat and connect, I think that's the best way as well.
Yeah.
Additionally,
And I these last few weeks I've done quite a bit of virtual healings and just directions and connections, and I'm surprised at how incredible it's going, where I prefer face to face in person, but it's also flooring me as to what's taking place for people virtually. So yeah, and I think too it's it is not from a place of woo-woo. I don't really love saying that, but it is newer age. So lots of people are getting on that bandwagon. So really just trusting the source that you're connecting with, because, someone's got to be able to hold sacred space for the vulnerable, right? In your wounded heart, per se. I'm holding hearts, not holding hands. I'm holding hearts is what's taking place.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's amazing. And Lisa, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, I'm excited. Yeah. Thank you for having me, you guys. Oh, I'm honored.
Yeah, it's amazing that you took this time out to from your family. I know it is past probably your bedtime, but
Way past.
thank you so much for doing this with us and spending this time
problem.
and holding
No
hearts
problem.
all over the world right now through this. And I know that people, for many, many years, hopefully will watch this particular episode and hopefully feel like you held their heart through what is right now an incredible, unprecedented time. And we will emerge victorious and amazing light beings. So thank you again for spending this time with us and sharing and all of that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Luke, thanks again as always for doing the show with me, brother. It's
My pleasure,
another amazing episode.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you so much. For those of you out there that are interested in connecting with Lisa, her Facebook and her Instagram is 9 of Water. She's based in London, Canada. So if you're in London, Canada, or going to be in London, Canada anytime in the future, once we can get together, I would encourage you to connect with Lisa in any way you possibly can. She's an incredible human being, and she's an amazing positive force in my life, and my wife's life, and my daughter's life, and Luke and all of the people she's connected to. She's changed our lives forever. So thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Luke. And everybody, just as I always say, please, love, learn, live, and be a better human every day. Be well, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Love you.
Love you guys.
Take care, everyone.